2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 SDGs pledge to ensure that no one is left behind and recognize disability across the 17 SDGs. We all know that these goals cannot be recognized till we include people living with disability, persons living with disability. It's not just about awareness or accessibility, but it's also about policy, advocacy, reaching out to people at the grassroots level, education, and a lot more. Today we have with us two special women who are joining us. Let me introduce them to you. We have with us Deepa Malik, Padma Shri Khel Ratna and Arjuna awardee and the first Indian woman to win a medal at the Paralympics. She's also the president of the Paralympic Committee of India. We also have with us Devika Malik, co-founder of the Wheeling Happiness Foundation, herself an international para-athlete and disability inclusion advocate. Thank you so much, Deepa ji and Devika, for joining us today. You know what, we were talking about leaving no one behind and ensuring when persons with disability are part of this. Deepa ji, to begin with, the basic question, how do we achieve equity for persons living with disability?
So there is a very important aspect, and I'm glad you asked equity more than equality, because we have to give equal opportunities and the jumpstart platforms and fill the gaps of needs along with opportunities. Because you may have opportunities, but you may not be able to avail these opportunities in lack of equity. So for example, you have to have if you say you're giving admissions to students with disability and not making the infrastructure inclusive and not making those ramps or putting the braille signages or tactile tiles, then you're not able to avail that opportunity. So I feel that equity is a very important aspect, and it can only be achieved when we think about accessibility in three ways. One, infrastructural, which is of course the physical thing.
The core, of course.
Yes, and then before that, the accessibility in the mindsets has to come, that it is not an option. It is to be done, because everybody has the right to avail every opportunity, being a human being or being a part of the society or a nation or the world. And third is the digital accessibility, because that is also something we need to look at now.
Talking about disability, your mother and you, both of you who, unique in your own ways, but you all had that journey together. Yes. Emotionally, how challenging was it? Because you've overcome it, you all are motivation for so many people and giving a platform to so many people through Wheeling Happiness, which we are going to be talking about through the interview. But just a little bit about your journey.
So when it comes to the emotional management, when we talk about people with disabilities, because I have had my disability since I was an infant, through my lived experience, I feel like when you acquire a disability later in life, in some ways that is more challenging, because you have to readjust your entire worldview and you have to kind of learn to live with your body all over again. So I, since my infancy, was dealing with my disability. Of course, as a child, that is more on the parents. So my parents were, getting my occupational therapy done. There were instances in school sometimes when I was really young, because again, I think it comes back to that same point of equity. If there wasn't so many other people with disabilities around me in my classrooms, so of course my fellow students who had not seen somebody look different, it was new to them as well. So because they found it awkward. I mean, I wouldn't personally call it bullying, because I remember at the age of 5 or 6, I think they just found me to be different. And then I used to come home crying once or twice, and then my parents sat me down and said, we can come and fight your battles for you, we can come and speak to your teachers. But my dad being in the army, we would change schools every 2 years. So then mom said, like, we don't have to keep doing this, you can stand up for yourself. So in a very positive way, at a 6-year-old level or an 8-year-old understanding level, whatever I could explain to my classmates and my teachers about my disability, to just make it easier for all of us.
But just talking about, and we see what you all have come up with. You really are a motivation, and even Devika, what you've done, you've co-founded Wheeling Happiness. So I think let's talk about that. Tell me, how did that come about? What was really the thought behind Wheeling Happiness?
I think the first thought I remember going into deciding to establish an organization was because, like you've just heard from mom, that how she adapted and
Yeah.
all the different ways in which she made her environment accessible for herself. So a lot of ladies in similar situations started reaching out to her because they were very astounded that you don't have a bladder and bowel control and yet you're out and about all the time. So how do you manage all of that? So there were actually instances when people would come and live in our home just to observe her daily lifestyle and learn from that.
Wow.
So we had 3-4 such ladies who've come and stayed in our home for a few weeks, who've observed and learned from her. So when that was going on, that's when we thought that if we do the same thing but in a more organized manner, we'll be able to reach out to so
More
many
people,
more
yeah.
people and make life easier for so many more people. Just the general mindset of accessibility, inclusion.
We've even had cases where they wanted to see how do you board a train,
Yeah.
how do you transfer into a car.
So basic things, but
What
there
kind
wasn't
of
enough
wheelchair are
awareness.
you? What kind of
Yeah.
wheelchair are you using? What kind of a car are you using? And then slowly of course, that's a long story, but I turned a biker, so got a bike customized, then we got the Motor Vehicle Act improvised to accept persons with
So
disability
you started doing
licenses.
things which were actually impossible, or in your mind it was impossible that these things are not
I
possible
think
for a person
more
with
than our
disability.
minds, it's people who just
The
limit
perception.
themselves, and
Yeah.
because it's a chicken and egg story. Whether people with disabilities will come out and do different things, uh, or people, the others will think. Nobody really believed that a woman with chest below paralysis is going to drive
Yeah.
in Himalayas or
Yeah.
cross the river Yamuna. So they all wanted to see how do you transfer, and then I started realizing that it's not the lack of will. It's the lack of awareness and lack of finding solutions and adaptation. And now you see there's a tremendous change. Initially,
So
people,
many.
I have seen my own people known to me in last 10 years. Initially, they would only get a picture clicked with just the face. And when they started following the social activities of mine, and I always insist that I want my wheelchair to be visible. I want people to see a wheelchair in Himalayas or by a riverside or in a party or in a wedding ceremony or on a stage, so that they know that the wheelchair goes everywhere, provided you have the right mindset. And now you see them, they are modeling, they're
So
following
many
fashion.
success stories. That's why I keep saying, I mean,
Yes.
you have been an inspiration, a motivation. And that's why even the name Wheeling Happiness, I mean, I think which one of you would want to answer that? How did that name come about? Because it really rings a bell.
It had two reasons behind it. One, anybody who saw me on the wheelchair came and said, "Oh, we are so sorry, you're not feeling well." Even if I had just crossed the river Yamuna and sat, or I had just done 9 high altitude passes and then sitting on a wheelchair, which regular people don't do. And yet I was asked that, is your health okay? Because just because I sit on a wheelchair, I'm supposed to be a patient. And I would always turn around and say that the only disease that I suffer from is happiness. So the happiness word kind of stayed. And of course, this part 2 was Devika's thought process, where she said that because she's done psychology,
Okay,
and then
so-
she did some studies in the psychology of women in sports.
So the emotional connect and the mental well-being.
She said that, Mom, you could do well because you've always found your source of happiness. For example, you loved biking, you did biking, you loved driving, you loved rallies, you loved adventure, you loved sports. So you've been able to identify the sources of happiness. So
Okay.
that's how I think.
And even the emblem in the logo, it's a wheel, but we know that it's the wheel of a wheelchair.
And it's
And the
smiling.
smiley, the smiley
Yeah,
also
and it
says it's a
smiles.
smile, absolutely. Just before we take the break, one quick question about Wheeling Happiness, and I of course want to get into the sports aspect. Both of you being Paralympians, and in the spirit of sports, a lot of people probably think or believe that Wheeling Happiness only works in the field of sports, but you all do so much more. When it comes to inclusion, tell us a little bit about that. I was also reading about the return of investment, a little on the happiness index. Tell us about that, Devika.
So with Wheeling Happiness, from the beginning, we were very clear that We don't want to operate on a model where we pick a vocation and then tell people that this is what we can teach you. We want people to tell us what, like we were saying, what makes them happy and how we can enable them to do that. So we are working across education as well as sports, and even sports, not just competitively, even recreationally. And then the third aspect is around advocacy, because we are advocating. I'm also associated with the Commonwealth Network for Young People with Disabilities, so that covers 56 countries. And then we advocate at the United Nations as well to ensure that inclusive policies trickle down to all member states. So definitely policy advocacy is also part of it. There's education, there's even fashion. We've done a lot of work with deaf and hearing impaired young people who were very interested in fashion. And then of course the very key aspect of accessibility aids, because however willing someone is and whatever they want to do, if they don't have the right kind of mobility to be able to do it, that is kind of the starting point. And there is a very large intersection with disability and poverty in the country.
Okay.
So if a decent functional active wheelchair costs even 15,000 rupees, that is also something that people have
afford,
been sitting on their beds for the want of it for 5, 7,
years,
10 years. And the moment they're able to sit on a good wheelchair and get out into their communities and even interact with their friends and neighbors for the first time in years, that itself is so good for their social and mental well-being. And being somebody who has a background in psychological education as well, like I was saying earlier, we support people in making that transition from being a non-disabled person to becoming a person with disability, and how they can restart their life and live it to their fullest potential, because it's not just a physical readjustment, it's also a mental readjustment.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I provide a lot of free of cost psychological counseling as well. So there's
it's a holistic approach, It's a holistic approach
yes.
to ensure, that everybody's happy in every aspect, and not just sports. And we are going to be talking about sports after this short break. So the hashtag is ability beyond disability. So we're going to be talking a lot more with the mother-daughter duos. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. We are in conversation with Deepa and Devika Malik. Deepa, you have been an inspiration. I've been saying it time and again through the interview. But when you started playing at that level, you won the first medal for India. Do you see that shift happen? What were the challenges when you had stepped in? And today for these young athletes, we've seen how well they performed at the Asian Games, and there's really been no looking back.
That's right. When we started, people had no clue. And I had a lot of challenges because I started playing after 40 years of age. So it was not just the age barrier, gender barrier. It was also that I came from an educated, financially pretty stable kind of a background. But even I had my share of challenges because there was no policies in place. There was no focus of media or talk about the sport. There wasn't acceptance of the sport as mainstream. It was always taken under the heading of charity, and a lot of confusion whether these sports are going to be conducted under the aegis of sports ministry or the social justice empowerment ministry. So, but now the shift definitely has happened. We have seen the current government and the focus of Honorable Prime Minister. He himself personally interacts, meets, takes accountability. So you've seen that focus trickle down and convert into great policies which are totally inclusive. Slowly and steadily, the sports ecosystem has become absolutely at par for the abled and non-disabled and abled athletes. So a tremendous change when it comes to acceptance of the sports as mainstream. There used to be hardly any female participation, but now we see 40% medals are being contributed by women in disability. We see women have also started winning medals at the Paralympic level and creating world records. And the major shift that has happened is that now even media, stakeholders, CSRs, sponsorships, they have shown keen interest in the movement of Paralympic sport. And I'm very proud to be a part of that change, to see the change, to initiate, to witness, and then to be a beneficiary of that change. And now I feel it's my moral duty to pass on the baton.
Devika, if I can ask you that about Wheeling Happiness, you have some great players who have been through the Wheeling Happiness Foundation. There's Sheetal Devi, we've seen how well she's performed. There's Yogesh, there's Prachi Yadav, just to name a few. So who are the upcoming stars? What's your take on that? And the kind of work which really goes, behind the success.
So Wheeling Happiness as a foundation, we try to focus more on the absolute grassroots, because once an athlete achieves some success and recognition at the national level or international level, then there are a lot of policies that are already in place with the government, or even sponsors come forward. But when an athlete is just starting out from a village, they have to sometimes make compromises on, I can either spend this money on my education or I can buy sports supplements. So we usually try to support athletes at that level so that they can come forward into the sport and they can focus on their training and how we can best support. Especially during the COVID lockdown, we did a lot of this. There were many of our beneficiaries whose the main breadwinners were hospitalized due to COVID.
Yeah.
So one of the girls, I remember, she called me and she said, I want to play, I'm very keen on this, but at this point we don't have any income coming in, so I can either pay my children's school fees or I can pay my coaching fees. So I told her, you just focus on your training, you worry about your kids' education. As far as any needs of your sports is concerned, we will look after that. So that is where I think at the grassroots, since we are able to provide that support, however big or small, it really encourages people to keep following their passion.
So, this is what you're saying at the grassroots level, of course, is key. And we see so many of them doing so well. I mean, that's why, the medal tally was much more than when we talk about sports for the para sports. So do you think that shift is happening, that when we talk about mainstream sports, do you see that happening?
Absolutely. Now, see, Khelo India itself, the Khelo India Para Games are itself a huge, representation of the fact that now government totally understands, and all the sponsors and stakeholders, they understand that what are the requirements and needs of the sports around para sports, and like you need attendance. These are the different disability categories. Different disabilities use different assistive aids, and as per the different muscle group functioning, they have a different way of throwing. There are point systems. Rules are different. The weight of the equipment is different. So people have now started understanding. So it's becoming easier, even when we present our annual training competition calendar and the budgeting. So there is definitely a different point of view when now the budgets are formed, because the athlete needs their competition partner. There are disabilities where you need wheelchair assistance. For the blind runners, the guide runners. So now it is easier to make them understand.
But a lot of credit, Deepa, goes to you for this, right? You won when you won the medal at Rio, we saw what it did to the sport, and we see it today. What did it do for you personally?
A lot. Personally, I think it really made me achieve my dream, which was ability beyond disability. I wanted to shatter the barriers of gender and disability and age, because I won my medal at the age of 46 years. I went on to win my Khel Ratna at 49 years. And now we see so many mothers have come out to play. Because they probably had the talent and the will, but they never really thought
they could do it at that age.
So they were thinking stereotypically that now that I'm married, I have children, I can't play. So I think it is not just for persons with disability, but even I think generally also it has
prioritizing yourself.
So that change has happened, and for me, I have had the honor of giving back to my sport, because that medal gave me a voice I could speak about the requirements and needs either through my NGO or through various other important responsibilities and roles that I have got through government as being the brand ambassador of Swachh Bharat or Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. We also encouraged people in disability to come out and vote through the Election Commission brand ambassadorship.
Yes, sir, yeah.
Became a member of the Azadi Amrit Mahotsav and TB Mukt Bharat.
So Devika, just a last question about Wheeling Happiness, a wish list of 5 things which are on Wheeling Happiness's wish list. Whether it's sport or whether it's anything else, what are those 5 things you're looking to achieve?
I don't know about numbers, but I think an umbrella wish is, of course, that we continue to empower people with disabilities to find their sources of happiness and enable them to follow the path that they can achieve those sources of happiness and bring that productivity, empowerment into their life and basically be seen as productive citizens of the world, because 15% of the world lives with disabilities. And if we are actually able to harness the potential of all of these people, there's a lot of research that goes to show that it's actually beneficial for us all. So it's not a charity; it makes business sense to do that as well. So right now, also for example, we have our Para Kabaddi Impact, a tournament going on that the foundation is organizing. We have teams from 9 states participating, and there are very inspiring stories within these athletes as well. Like Mom was saying about age. So our senior most athlete in these teams is a 49-year-old person who's playing. And similarly about the awareness of these sports and how far it has come. Earlier, it would take many years for a person in disability to come to know that sports is an option. Now we have someone here who met with an accident just 12 months ago, and they have done their rehabilitation. They have got a prosthetic limb, and before that he used to be a kabaddi player with the able-bodied athletes, and today he is here playing kabaddi.
So
in
he's
this
still
para
following
kabaddi
his
league.
passion and his love, So that truly is, I think, giving him the happiness. So that's what the name signs, wheeling happiness. And at the end of the day, it's all about happiness. Thank you so much, Deepa and Devika, for speaking with us. It was really wonderful. Thank you.